We are live, and we're live with Zachary Sluser. He's the director of a really marvelous movie that I just recently saw at the Flyway Film Festival called The Driftless Area. And Zachary's in Hollywood, California, and he's here today. These are the students at the UWM Film School. That's University of Milwaukee in Wisconsin. They actually U-shape around me at tables. You can't see all of them. Students, please put your hand up if you're on camera so that we can have your permission to record you. There's our release form. And hopefully, let me just make sure and check sound. Zach, will you talk, please? And
hello.
Looks like we're good. If somebody would dim the lights just a little bit, we will begin. The students here, what I wanted to say was, one, I loved your movie, and you know that, and we met recently, and we chatted briefly there. I asked a question during the Q&A section, and then asked you if you'd be a guest. Oh, it doesn't have to be that dark. Thank you. But the question that I asked, I felt was completely relevant because this was your first feature. You'd made some other short films. You named talent, and one of the conversations I've had over the past 2 years in that area is with filmmakers who are terrified of getting involved with SAG and SAG actors and union productions. And out of the gate, you've done a movie, The Driftless Area, which is a wonderful movie. And you've got Zooey Deschanel, you've got John Hawke, you have other name talent in the movie. The young man, the lead.
Anton Yelchin.
Anton Yelchin in the movie. And so during the Q&A, I asked if you'd had any pros or cons or issues working with the unions, and you addressed SAG and you addressed working with ATSE. So one of the things that I was hoping is that during this discussion, both for the students here, we've got a SAG workshop coming up on Sunday, actually, where SAG is coming in to talk about low-budget contracts and how they can put union talent into their films. But I wanted to talk about that path for you, from going from short to feature, from going from that route to using name talent and getting them secured for your movie, and that career path. It's not one question; it's probably multiple questions. But
sure. Well, just again to the SAG thing, I had made a number of short films after college, and I worked with SAG actors in all of those films, so this wasn't the first film that I did that. But I also, I mean, when you're making a film, then you want whoever is best for the role, and unless creatively you want to be working with non-actors, then the best actors generally are going to be in SAG if they're professional actors. So, and if you're making a short film, then there's no reason to be afraid of SAG or the unions, or if you're making a low budget feature film at any budget level. I mean, yeah, I've personally never encountered people that are concerned about SAG. So maybe if you could let me know what the concerns were, then I could maybe address them.
They're afraid that SAG is going to take their money or their film, or that they're going to have some kind of problem. Typically, that they just don't want to sign the contracts because they're scared of the paperwork.
Unfounded fear.
That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
I mean, it's not. Also, I mean, especially if they're going to come and do a workshop, they'll tell you about like the ultra low budget agreements and all of that. It's not. I mean, it's paperwork, but it's not that difficult, and it's worth it to have the right actors in your film. Yeah. So, but that was the first question. The other was how the journey from the short films to the first feature, and how I got the actors involved.
Yeah. So let's recount your experience in the shorts and how you
sure.
Because also one other important factor is that the movie you made was based on a book.
Yeah.
So securing those rights, working with the author. I mean, you've got a lot of things that are huge pluses, for a feature film and for a filmmaker like yourself.
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, as I was saying with you the other day, I think just before I say anything, I would just preface it by this is just what I did.
Right.
There's many different routes you could take to pursue your career or making your first feature in LA, New York, or Wisconsin, or otherwise. So I'm not saying what I did is like the only way to do it. I just want to make that clear. But for me, yeah, I made a few short films. I'd made two, and I think after I made the second short film, I had discovered Tom Drury's novels, and his first book is called The End of Vandalism, which is a really wonderful book. And I knew he had a new book out. It was called The Driftless Area, and I was already really drawn to the way Tom's prose was very spare and matter of fact and dry humored, and yet there was something very magical about it without it being wide-eyed magic. It was very like magic in the everyday, and or at least he even made supernatural things feel like they were the everyday too. And when I read The Driftless Area, I read it twice in 2 days, and I was just so taken with it because it spoke to the part of me that grew up in the Midwest. It spoke to you know, a variety of spiritual or like encounters that I had in my life at that point, and it also spoke to my sense of humor and the kind of movies I like. And so I went and I reached out to I just blindly cold emailed the author, and was lucky that he answered it. And it turned out he lived in Pasadena at the time, and we met for coffee. And in that email, I just told him, you know, this is why I think, this is why I love your book. This is why I think it would make a great film, and why I would be uniquely suited to direct it. And, you know, I was 26, I think, at the time, and that still sounded good to him. So I was very lucky that he was open-minded and a nice guy, and we just clicked. So the first thing is I wanted to option the book, and I had never done anything like that before. His agent, you know, was protecting him initially, and it made it seem like it would be very difficult to get the movie made based on the contract demands that the agent was saying were necessary, because I thought the movie would have to be made at a much smaller budget level, and there were minimums in the contract that were being discussed. And so the agent actually really smartly and thankfully recommended, he said, well, you and Tom both want to do this. Why don't you guys just do a handshake deal and write this together? And
wow.
That is what we did. I can't say that you would always want to do that, because obviously as a filmmaker you might have a difference of opinion with your co-writer or an author of the book, and then you might have spent a year on something and then come to loggerheads, and then, you know, the guy decides to take his book elsewhere. But I love Tom's novel so much. Tom and I had a really excellent rapport, and so we just began to work together, and I wrote a draft. I kicked it over to him. We kept passing it back and forth. We started working that way. I didn't have a representation at the time, so I didn't know how to get the script out to anyone. I tried just anyone I knew or that I would meet. In that process, Tom Drury shared a short story that he's written a lot of short stories for the New Yorker, and one of them was this one called Pathlights, and he shared it with me, thought I might think it would be an interesting one to make a short film of, and so and I did, and so I adapted that really quickly, and then a friend introduced me to John Hawkes, and we made this short film, Pathlights, and we took it around to festivals in 2010, and someone who was a fan of Tom's book the Driftless Area, was inquiring about the rights, found out that I had been adapting the book with him, reached out to me. We met, he read the novel and was really excited about it, tried to push it up the ladder at the company he was working at, which was at the time deciding to only make horror films, so that didn't really work. And then he ended up introducing me. He's like, all right, well, the short film is really great. You should have representation that can help you get the feature made. So he introduced me to this woman, Nicole Romano, who became my manager. And then he eventually sent the script into CAA, which is one of the bigger talent agencies in town. And that's when the wheels started to move, but it still took a few years to get the cast and the financing together at that point. But Rick, if you want to jump in, or I'd end up talking for another 10 minutes.
Did they package the project for you?
Yeah, so CAA basically, they said the script was sent to their indie financing department, and there was an agent there, Nick Ogioni, who really loved it, and he basically said, I love the script, and we love John Hawkes. And, I think I'm going to introduce you to a talent agent here at the company. And if you guys can put together a package that works for us, we'd like to help you, put the financing and sell the movie and, all that. So then this agent, Charlie Jennings, helped put together the cast with me and eventually Keith Carville, who became my lead producer, but he kind of came in a little bit still down the road. So Anton Yelchin was my first choice. I'd seen him in this movie Like Crazy, and he's been working for many, many years and is in the Star Trek movies and Fright Night movies like that. But I saw him in Like Crazy, and I thought this guy is really he has like this innocence and vulnerability, and yet he has like a very sharp intelligence at the same time, which I think is rare, that he's someone you can empathize with and root for very easily, and yet he's not a dummy, even though he's very easy. He wears his heart in his sleeve, and so we went out to him. I was really lucky when you have an actor like John Hawkes, and this was my bet. Was after working with John on the short, I knew this role was perfect for him, and I thought, other actors are going to want to do this movie because they respect John, and then also we got a bit of luck because John did Winter's Bone, and he got an Oscar nomination for that movie, and then he kept turning in incredible work in every film that he did. So the people that already knew him were excited to work with him, and as the years went on, people became more aware of the work he was doing, and so that was a big deal to have him on board. And so John and I both met with Anton, and we started to put the cast together. I got put in touch with a few production companies whose financing fell apart, and then a friend introduced me to Keith, who ended up coming on board to produce the movie. And Keith and I and one of our co-producers went in to meet with Charlie at CAA. We went through a number of actresses for the lead role, and I met with a few of them, and one of them was Zoe Deschanel, and she and I had a great meeting, and I thought she was, I loved the way that she saw the film and the role, and she agreed to do it, and then from that point, the financing more easily started clicking into place, and we moved forward very quickly. So what was like a 7-year process happened very quickly. Yeah.
And it resulted in a wonderful project, a wonderful film. Do you have a release date on the film?
Yeah, so the movie premiered at Tribeca in April, and I can't say, there's a company that has bought the movie that I'm very excited about. We haven't done a press release yet, but it'll be released in the spring.
Okay, fair enough.
So not too long, not too long.
Awesome. So, and when it is, we'll let everyone know. so that
That'd
they
be
can
great.
so they can also partake of it.
Just so you guys know, the Driftless Area is like, just very briefly, it's a romantic, dark humored, contemporary fairy tale is what I would say, set in the upper Midwest, about time and fate and how these characters try and control that if they have the ability to control it. So, but it's told with, like I was saying earlier about Tom Drury's work, it's told with a very matter-of-fact humor and naturalism. So it's not, the ethereal elements aren't very fantastical. Yeah.
So, excellent, thank you. So with regard to packaging, are all of the talent primarily CAA talent, or did they reach out?
No, Alia Shawkat is in the movie, and she was on board for a couple of years. She's at UTA. Okay. There were a good number of actors from CAA, one of whom this brilliant Irish actor, Kieran Hines, who's on Game of Thrones and was in Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy and There Will Be Blood. He's a really wonderful character actor of stage and screen, and he was someone that Charlie represented, and he liked the script but wasn't able to commit to it right away because we approached him about 6 months out, and he has a supporting role. So I waited for him because he was just too exciting to think about anyone else. Frank Langella is in the movie. He's not at CAA. So I think they represent 4 or 5 of the main actors in the film. Yeah, and they sold the movie for us as well. And the same guy, Nick Occhioni, sold the domestic rights to the film. So there's a few people that were just kind of the guardian angels of this film. One of which is this guy, Dan Cohen, this producer, who has no vested interest in the movie. He's not a producer on the movie. He just loved the book, loved the script, and wanted to help see it get made. And so he introduced me to my manager. He introduced the project to CAA. He's just one of these people that's a good guy, and
awesome.
Lucky enough to somehow be connected with, that he found me, and found through the book, really, through Tom's work. And then, yeah, these 2 agents at CAA, and my manager, and then Keith, the producer, who actually didn't mess around and was true to what he said and got the movie made. Yeah.
Well, that's fantastic. I think a lot of people that don't know, when they think of packaging, they're not sure how it works, or they think that everything has to be self-contained, and in some cases it sometimes does. But the fact that an agency can reach out and secure other talent from other agencies and co-opt it and make it, because ultimately it's the good of the project. And
that's exactly right. I mean, they're interested, especially once 1 or 2 of their clients are in the film. They want it to be a good movie, and at that point, they just want whatever is best for the film. They're always going to recommend their clients for certain roles, but they also want whatever. They're supporting the director and the producers, and so yeah, they're very reasonable. It wasn't like you have to cast the whole film at CAA. Which, by the way, you know, for my first film, I should be so lucky because they represent so many amazing and influential and notable actors. So, but luckily, we were able to have some really great champions at a few other agencies as well. So,
I think, some people are afraid. I hear this from filmmakers all the time, that somebody else is going to try and control them, or they're going to try and take over the project, or they're going to try and put people in that don't belong. And while those at times are realistic concerns, for the most part, anyone who is a professional and who has an interest in the business, agents, managers, talent, want the right people, want the right project. Sure, they want to profit, they want to be paid, they want to get whatever might be due them, except in the case of Dan Cohen, who was an angel, but he wanted to see the project made. I think that it's always wise to understand that there are a lot of people who can come on board that can really add value because they really want the project to succeed.
Yeah, I mean, everyone is makes films their own way. Some people like to do to work on a smaller budget and control every single aspect. That's fine. For me, what I love about filmmaking is the collaboration, and so I'm very much welcoming of the right people collaborating on every aspect of the movie, and the people in the agency world are different than your collaborators on set, like your production designer and your DP and your editor, your sound designer, your actors, but they also, you need to make sure that they understand the film you want to make, and if they do, if they get that, I mean, I never would have made the film without these two guys at CAA. And I remember the first meeting I had with Zoe, she was saying, this guy, Charlie, the agent that was putting the talent together, she says, I've never been pitched by an agent who so thoroughly understood the script before. And that really impressed her. And so, I mean, that's invaluable because I don't have access as a first-time director to all of these people personally. You need people to vouch for you. I mean, but again, I just state too, I have a number of friends that are wonderful filmmakers that made their first films for $50,000 and did not go through this whole rigmarole to get their first film made. And I by no means am saying like that this is the way you have to get a movie made. There's so many great tools at your disposal to get your first film made, and most people would say don't wait on other people to tell you when you can make your movie, and I think that's true. For me, I fell in love with this story so profoundly and wanted to tell it. There was no other story to tell, and so this film required a certain budget that was even more ambitious than what we ended up making. But so it required that we had some named talent in the film to warrant the spend, to warrant the budget. And the way that happens is you have your foreign sales agent, and they have equations of what actors are worth overseas, and they kind of tell you what your movie will attract on a low and medium and high level, what your expectations can be. And that's really important to how you put the financing together, once you're at a certain level of budget. So, but yeah, I just want to say, like, if there's, by no means, I'm sure there's people in the room that just want to go and make their first film. So please, I'm not saying you have to go and work with a bunch of agencies to make a good movie at all. this is what I did for what this project necessitated. So yeah.
That's excellent, and that's what we want. We want your experience because we learn from your experience and other experiences, and the students here will make their own path. But what they can get from the different aspects of what you went through, that can help them on their journey. So and me,
yeah,
anyone listening.
Yeah, I think just the most important thing is like that you feel passionate about the story you want to tell. I'm a big advocate of not just making a movie for the sake of making a movie. I mean, I feel like you should always know why you're telling the story and what drew you to the story. And so, because no one else is going to believe in the project if you don't, with your heart and soul. And so, yeah, and if you do wholeheartedly believe in that you have to tell this story for whatever reasons, then however it needs to get made, you just need to have the patience and perseverance to get it made, whether that's, taking a credit card or doing a Kickstarter campaign and making it for, $15,000 to $30,000, or it's, partnering with a producer, finding some money, or an agency and putting a cast together and getting investors and tax credits and that whole dance. And sometimes, it's worth waiting a few years and making the movie right and working on a different project in the meantime. And other times, you should just go ahead and make whatever's in front of you, so you can have work to show people. That's why short films, I feel, are really useful, because you want to show people what you can do, and it's a lot more achievable to shoot something on a small budget in a few days at a high quality level. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. I have a question that I think you were asked actually at Flyway, and I remember your answer, so I believe. So I'm going to ask it here, and that is, the name actors read for you. What is casting like?
Oh, right. So, yeah, especially in your first film, and probably your first few films, actors like John Hawkes and Frank Langella or Zooey Deschanel, Aubrey Plaza was in the film also. Like actors like this, and Kieran Hines, they don't read for people like me. They are offered the role. So any actor that's going to come in and be, that an agency is representing, especially if they have the track record and the resumes that these people have, you want to be sure, based on their previous work, that you see something in them that is right for the role. You have to offer them the role, and often, you write like I wrote a nice letter to the actor as to introducing myself and the project, and why the project's important to me, and why I thought they would be great in the role, and why I'd like to meet with them to hear their thoughts on it. And then you wait, and they read the script, and then you get a meeting with them. There's a few opportunities where we went out to a few actors, and I had a few meetings, and then based on the meetings, you decide who should play the role, which can be very difficult, because you don't want to typecast an actor and have them do the same thing they've always done. But if you can't see a little bit of it in their previous work, and they can't read for you, it becomes really a leap of faith and challenging to know if they'll do it. So the first kind of 7 actors in the film are just offers. And then we shot the film in Vancouver, and so we had a local casting director, and the rest of the roles we cast traditionally. We had 15 to sometimes 30 or 40 people come in or put themselves on tape, and then we had callbacks, and then we cast them. And so we cast, another 15 or 18 speaking roles as we were in pre-production. I had to be looking at tapes with the producers, and then we'd go in for callbacks. And so, yeah. So you don't often get to audition people at the level that I'm at, excuse me. You have to offer them the role. Yeah.
Let me ask you this, and I'm going to have a separate question regarding incentives or things like that, but being that you shot in Vancouver, were you then subject to Canadian incentives and hiring Canadian talent for the cast and crew?
Right. So the movie's set in the upper Midwest. The Driftless Area is where Rick and I were just at, and the Flyway Film Festival is right on the river. Everyone knows where that is? Okay.
I don't know if they do, but there is actually a film festival in Wisconsin called the Driftless Film Festival at Mineral Point.
Right.
And between that area and Flyway, you're right sandwiched in that area.
Yeah, so the Driftless Area, the whole notion of it is that the glaciers in the last ice age came down and flattened the whole Midwest, except for this little pocket of land in northeastern Iowa, southeastern Minnesota, predominantly in Wisconsin and southwestern Wisconsin, and it's just a little tip of northwestern Illinois. And so that land looks like the whole Midwest used to. It's like a time capsule. So it has these large, rolling hills, rocky bluffs, and carved river valleys. It's beautiful. And for our movie, it's this wonderful setting of this notion of this kind of stubbornly timeless landscape and backdrop to a story of characters that are moving between lives, let's say. And so it's a great setting for a fable. I wanted to shoot it in the Driftless area and was planning on shooting in this town called Galena, Illinois, and then I was going to go up the river into Wisconsin for a few days as well. Illinois has a tax credit. I know some TV shows shoot there. We were told that the tax credit office was not very timely in issuing the credits. And the way tax credits work, I don't know if the students have, I don't know if how much everyone knows about it.
Well, let's take care of this now, because not only the students here, but the people who may listen to this in the future also have quite a worthy.
Yeah, so I mean, like, very, very simply, so for instance, Illinois, I believe, is a 30% tax credit. So what it means is everything you spend in Illinois, so from your rentals to crew salaries,
below the line.
Yeah, below the line. Any actors you would hire that are Illinois based, food, just anything would go towards that. 30% of that money is issued back as a tax credit, and then you can get a loan against that tax credit, what your anticipated tax credit is, and you can use that towards your budget of making the movie. The guy giving you the loan gets a little interest back, and then they usually, as I understand it, I'm a little out of my depth in this area of filmmaking, but as I understand it, they then sell the tax credits to people that would actually use it in that state. So, so there's a number of middlemen, but so obviously 30% of, you know, your budget, or on top of your budget, is huge, especially in a movie that you're making for a couple $1 million or even a couple $100,000. It's huge. I mean, you know, that's a lot of money for a film, for an independent film. So that's why you see a lot of independent movies shooting in Louisiana or Georgia these days, or in Canada, because they have the best tax credit programs. And so Illinois, we were hearing, and our lender was telling us that Illinois wasn't issuing the credits in a timely manner. And so, and we couldn't get any assurances from them that they would. So we moved the film to British Columbia, and we shot it in these rural towns and communities, an hour to an hour and a half out of the city of Vancouver. So we got an even better tax credit. It's about 40% in Vancouver. And then also, if we would have shot in Galena and in Wisconsin, we would have had to take a lot of our crew base from Chicago and put them all up in hotels, give them per diems because it's union. And there's a lot of expenses that just don't end up on the screen. But although you would say the backdrop of the actual landscape is ending up on the screen. In Vancouver, everyone's going to bed in their own bed at night, and we would just drive an hour out of the city, an hour and a half out of the city every day to shoot. So we saved a ton of money in housing, per diems, all that. And then we got more money back from the tax credit. So even though, so I spent a lot of time trying to find the look in British Columbia that made sense. I felt like I justified it in that the story is based in a Midwest, but really it's an imagined Midwest, and it's the notion of the landscape. And then I did my best to make it feel like it had these rolling hills. Maybe there's more pine trees in the movie than you'd actually find in Wisconsin, but it seems, you know, I think it works. So.
Well, and part of the reason is we don't have incentives in Wisconsin, and that precludes people from coming and shooting here, and it precludes a lot of people who live and work here from creating projects and utilizing those. Maybe someday, you know, we had them and they did.
Yeah, it would be great. I'll tell you, like, there was a great tax credit program in my home state in Iowa. It was for like a summer or two, it was the best in the nation. I think it was also 40 or 50%, but what happened was they weren't really prepared for it, and the floodgates opened, and all these companies from LA and New York descended upon Des Moines. They were a bit overwhelmed, and it all took was a few you know, shady individuals that ended up charging some Land Rovers and things to the tax, and you know, they committed a few $1 million of fraud, and the governor shut it down and ruined the party for everyone else. So
which demonstrates limited thinking, because that was not the case in Wisconsin, but we had at one time the proposed was the most film friendliest of all the then 35 states that had them. But by the time we got around to actually implementing them, the other states upped theirs to be more competitive.
Right.
And each state has different things, whether you can sell a tax credit or get a loan on it, or everyone has a different way of working their incentives.
Yeah.
But the bottom line,
I would say, like, it's important to know that, but if you're working at a budget level where you could actually take advantage of a tax credit, you're at least working with a few $100,000, and at that point, it would be really wise to have a producer that has some experience in that kind of financing, because it's a lot to take on directing a movie. I mean, it's important, just like it's important to understand how the camera works and the lens choices and lighting and all that, so you can talk to your DP and he can talk, or he or she can talk to the gaffer, and you understand technically how to talk to them to achieve creatively what you and them want. It's important to understand enough so you can have conversations with people about this, but you don't have to be a master of tax credit loans as a filmmaker.
No, your producers should. But one of the things I was going to say is that it speaks to the short-sightedness of the political process, that a few bad apples spoil it for everyone. What needs to be in place, and this is my political moment, is for people to know how to administer them and how to account for them, so that they can catch and eliminate the fraud and prosecute the fraud where it need be, but wisely administer them to all the other legitimate people who are out there, not just throw the plan out because somebody committed a crime. You don't stop banking because somebody robs a bank.
They needed to start smaller in Iowa, was the problem, and I would just very shortly politically as well say, I mean, if Wisconsin had a governor that supported unions more, then maybe, you know, then there would be a film program that would work. Because the whole thing with tax credit programs is you're supporting IATSE and Teamsters and all these unions that all of your crew members and SAG and everyone works for in order to be treated fairly. And the whole point of these programs is to stimulate employment, to stimulate the economy. And if the governor doesn't believe in unions to begin with, then I doubt they're going to believe in a tax incentive program for film. So
no, very true.
Get off the soapbox on that. I mean, but anyway.
Well, one further comment that I will make is that this started in the 80s when the dollar was strong and the Canadian dollar was weak, literally about 50%. So just going into Canada, you had 50% more purchasing power on your dollar.
That's true, yeah.
And then they offered like 40% incentives, so all of Hollywood, every filmmaking, you know, who had a project raced into Canada because it was, you know, you couldn't beat that deal. Now, when you think about it politically, if you really wanted to build up your infrastructure in your own country, you wouldn't have people flying to Canada and Romania and different places that offer better deals. You'd make sure that the states that you have working together would have the best deal possible, so that the U.S. because when you go to Canada, you have a cap on how many U.S. Citizens can work on your project and how many Canadians you have to hire. I mean, which is the same thing that's true here. I mean, in other words, Georgia will say you have to hire local Georgia, casting crew. You can't just, the nomad life is over.
Right.
But my political rant is our country should look at bringing business back into the States rather than having.
I mean, it's a big thing in California, of course, because the movie industry is and the television industry are predominantly here, but we lose business all the time to all these other places. So the governor here keeps trying to make the tax program better here. Anyway, but to your point, just before, we probably should move on. But they did prevent me from. There were two other actors that I was trying to bring in from the States, and at that point, you know, the BC film people have been very kind and accommodating to us, and they said, okay, you know, it's enough. Now you should be hiring locally, because from their point of view, it's like, you know, the whole point of the program is to stimulate our film economy, and you know, so I totally get it from their point of view. But obviously, as a filmmaker, it's you know, you want what you want, and so, but there's compromise at every step of the way. You know, the other thing that, like, shooting in a place that everyone is going to for an incentive, we would go to locations, and me and my DP would be, you know, my DP was from Oslo. And so he had never shot in Vancouver either. So when we would find these locations, we'd go, wow, this is perfect. And then we'd hear some of the crew members go, oh yeah, I shot here with the da-da-da show and this and this. And then I would just start to be crestfallen, because I'd feel like, oh, I thought we had something special, and now, you know, these guys worked here, you know, twice last year. And then you have to, part of that was me just, okay, you know, we're going to light it and shoot it in such a way that it was not like, you know, a sci-fi show. You know, we're going to treat it differently, and you get over that. But definitely, you know, there are benefits and minuses to working in a place where everyone is going to. Crew members are used to be getting paid a certain level in a town like Vancouver with all these big shoots coming there. So while there is a great crew base there and everyone's really talented and friendly, they're used to working at a certain level of money, so it's harder to get them for a small film. And also, I found it was difficult to get the right kind of people. It just took more time to find them, and luckily we did find them. But anyway, maybe we should move on to...
Well, we will. I think one of the benefits of this conversation is that it explains to people why they may not get hired either as cast or crew. If a film is traveling, there are only so many opportunities. So I could sit here and go, well, that's great, this movie's being made, but I can't even audition for it because they're shooting in New York or in Georgia, where they have to local hire. They're going to Canada, or I'm a crew member and I can't travel because they're only hiring locally. So it does explain how opportunities have become limited in some ways, but that should never stop anyone anyway. You know, there are other opportunities in other places. Let me follow this up, though, because we're talking this. When I asked you the question at Flyway, you pointed out that you didn't have any issues with SAG, but learning to work with IATSE and following budget and scheduling, that there are different issues when you work with a union crew. You want to address that, please?
Well, just when you work on a short, you know, everyone is working for free, basically, or for deferrals, and so everyone is giving you generously of their time. But you can also, you know, you never want to be dangerous. Like, you never want to push people to, you know, 14, 15, 16 hours and then have them come back and work for you the next day without giving them a proper turnaround, or B, providing at least like a second meal and making sure everyone is not upset about this. But, you know, in a short film, sometimes you do it, especially if it's a small crew and everyone's friends, and, you know, as long as it's safe and people aren't having to drive home, you know, at 5 in the morning after working 16 hours, you know, then, you know, sometimes you do it. But on a union film, you know, it gets very expensive once you hit, you know, your 12 hours. You know, to go over, everyone's earning time and a half, and you're going to get shut down. So, like, but also, just beyond that, just there's so many rules and regulations, and they're there because people will take advantage of workers if they're not there. So I totally, you know, firstly respect why unions exist and why the rules are the rules. But as a filmmaker, especially, you know, on my first film, you're doing everything you can to get what you want, and when time is limited and your schedule shrinks on you, or you lose a location because, you know, you can't get the right permitting, or you can't get the right permitting to have a certain kind of, you know, picture car vehicle on a certain road, or, you know, there's just, all these other rules that get thrown onto you, and then you say, well, we'll just shoot it this way. And then, you know, the department head says, no, we can't shoot it that way. That's not safe. And that's important to listen to, but I'm just saying, you know, beyond safety, there are a lot of rules that you just, so when a challenge comes up, you don't have the money because it's a small film. You don't have the money to just say, we'll just shoot an extra day, or we'll just come back here to this location, or we'll get a different, more expensive piece of equipment, or we'll have another crew member, or, you know, when you're shooting at night, you know, in a rural location, you need a lot of light in order to make it look somewhat realistic. And certain kinds of lights cost a lot of money, and I don't know. Anyway, there's a lot of things that come up that you have to work within constrictions, and union constrictions are just like budget constrictions. You just, sometimes you feel like you're boxed in every way you want to solve a problem, you feel boxed in. And sometimes it's good to listen to that and just think, okay, how can I creatively think of this scene or shooting this scene differently that is, maybe it's just as good as my original intention, but it's just different. And I think that's part of being a first-time filmmaker, is learning when to be stubborn and protect your vision, because the compromise is truly a compromised vision, and it is worse. And when your crew, you should really listen to your crew members and the people helping you, that yes, this isn't what you've been planning and how you had envisioned it, but it could be just as good. It could help tell the story to the same end in just a different way. So yeah.
I'm very glad you spoke to that, because maybe, and I've recommended this to filmmakers for many years. That is, when you make your project, you know, and you've done your guerrilla shooting and you've kind of gotten that out of your system, and you can always go back to it. Take a project and go, I'm going to try and adhere to the rules that would be in place if I had SAG talent or IATSE crew. So I'm going to have to take a break at certain hours. I'm going to have to feed at certain hours. I'm going to have to quit at a certain time, because those rules, as you point out, really are there for the safety of the cast and crew, and they don't exist for much other reason than to secure that and to make sure that people get paid, and are paid well for what they do, and that they aren't violated. I spoke with a religious leader, a very prominent religious leader, one time about his religion, and I will draw this parallel, which may or may not work, but I draw the parallel. He said a lot of people think that, you know, God has put us in a box and we have all these rules and regulations we have to live from, and you look at me and wonder why I can't go outside the box. He said the difference between you and I is that I look at what I have inside the box and all the room I have to play, to get what I want and to live God's life. And I went, now I'd never thought of it that way, because I always looked at it like, wow, you have to follow all these rules and regulations. That must be mind-boggling. He was like, no, that's my freedom. You know, that's my expression. Right. So in the same way, filmmakers can learn to play within a set of constraints. And
yeah, I think that's totally. I think that's really smart, because especially if you take it as an advantage to you, as opposed to feeling like you're being boxed in all the time. It's just it's a happier life to live. But,
exactly.
But B, yeah, I mean, it could be a negative to shoot with unlimited days and unlimited hours in the day, because that can breed an indecisiveness.
Sure.
If you have to get something in a limited amount of time and a limited budget, then you have to be a lot. You need to make sure everyone is on the same page, and then you just go with your gut a little bit more. And if it feels right, and if you're your collaborators are in line, then you just execute, and you don't sit around and waste time, shooting a scene from, a dozen more angles needlessly, because I know I only need, these 4 points of coverage to get the scene I want. I don't need this additional shot. My time would be better served moving on, and also not burning the actors out and keeping them fresh for the next scene, not burning the crew out. That's the other thing. Beyond the safety, you don't want to tax the crew because then they have, especially in a feature, they're coming back to work the day after and the day after and the day after. So you want to keep everyone feeling fresh and excited about the film and happy and feeling like we're getting things done and we're not wasting time.
And that is an excellent point. That's to keep them happy and fresh and pleased to be there, and that you're moving forward. I also think, and I'll just make the statement that people should learn to limit themselves to a shot ratio as opposed to, because you're digital, you can shoot endlessly. But if you say I want to get 5 takes, per setup or something, or 3, like the old days when you had film and you had to pay for everything.
It's a point of diminishing returns for sure with your actors especially. I mean, there's obviously myth, not even myth, just there's stories about people like David Fincher, and he'll go and shoot 50 takes or 70 takes of a dialogue scene. I would just say, if you're as amazing as David Fincher's films are, then maybe actors will put up with that. But for me, I've never had the time to do that in my shorts or on this feature. But I mean, unless you're trying to physically break someone, I don't know how going on take 40 and 50 you're going to get a better performance from the actor. But I would never second guess someone like David Fincher, whose films are great. I mean, that's what works for him. But I would just say, for me, I personally have never seen a performance get better past take 8 or 9. I mean, I just don't see it. So yeah.
So I want to open it up to the students in a moment. Find out who raises their hand first. But I have a question that could serve as my last question if they have other questions. But that is, because of this being your first feature, or the shorts that you use SAG Talent, you worked with John in the short and stuff like that. What is your role as a director, psychologist, working with them? How do you get a performance from them or not? If they have a means or mode of working, and many of them do. You might have one actor who's great on the first take, and another actor that's great on the third take. Those kinds of things. How do you work with them so that it's amiable? I mean, so that you don't step on their toes, or you don't. Because there are horror stories of Dame Talent working with first-time directors or newer directors. I
think so. A few things. One is to really take advantage of that first meeting you get with the actor, and that you establish a respect level. I was very confident in the script and in the film I wanted to make, and being able to work with them, but I'm also very humble in that I didn't, go up to these people and try and, tell them that I'm gonna, you're gonna get in line for me, and if you can't do things the way I want you to, this isn't gonna work. I mean, there's a respect level, I think, as a first-time director that you should always have with your collaborators, which is you should listen. I'm not of the mind that the director is a dictator and that everyone else is just that actors are models and they just give you what you need. I mean, for me, the excitement is the actors are going to show you things that you hadn't thought about and elevate the material. It's your job to know whether their choices that you hadn't planned for are in keeping with the way the story should be told or not. And if it's not, then you go up to them and you gently move them back in the direction that the story needs. But that begins from the first meeting. You let them know what how you see the story and how the tone and the character, why you're telling the film. But then you should listen to how they see it, and then you just begin a discussion. And for me, I know I'm not going to have a ton of rehearsal time, so these conversations leading up to the shoot are critical, that the actors and I understand each other, understand the movie we're making and the character, and then if we have time to do a few reads with other actors, then those are very important, because on set we have very limited time. We don't have time to rehearse. We get to set we run through a blocking, and then we just shoot. So, I mean, that's an independent film. And, you know, someone like Frank Langella, I met over the phone, and we just have these phone calls every day during pre-production, and then he showed up, and we met each other for the first time while he's going through wardrobe, and we had assembled, like, with the costume designer, you know, several racks of clothing that we thought was appropriate for the character, and then with him, we would choose the wardrobe, and then we just went to work. Like Rick's saying, though, I mean, every actor has a different method of working, and they also, some actors are better on the first takes, others are better later on. And once you start to realize that, you can decide whose close-ups, you know, whose coverage you're going to shoot first. Obviously, you know, if an actor starts having diminishing performances after a while, you want to make sure that they get the camera on them earlier in the scene than the other person. But yeah, I mean, the other thing is, like, I feel like some first-time directors or people seem to say they want to really make sure they assert themselves in front of the crew and the cast so people respect them. And for me, if your crew or your cast doesn't respect you by day one, then you're in trouble, because you have like weeks of pre-production to befriend these people and to get them to get on your side and how you see the movie, and you're working with them. So for me, if the actor is if the performance is right, I leave them alone. I let them know, that it's good. Let's do one more. If we're doing many more takes for performance, you have to let them know why. Otherwise, so it's just about communication. You let them know when things are good. You let them feel confident that things are good, but you just keep moving. There's no point in going up to an actor just for the sake of talking to them so you could be seen as the director. I think it's important that you respect the fact that, especially when you work with people like Frank Langella or John Hawkes or Zoe, who have been working for years and years, that they're gonna come prepared, and they're going to be doing great work. And so if things aren't working, then you approach them and you have a conversation away from the crew, and then you go back to work. If things are working, you let them know. Some actors really want to have a discussion in between every take, and you have to listen to them so that they feel safe and taken care of, that they're on the right path. But you also can't indulge them so much that the whole shoot comes to a stop. So it's kind of like having all these internal evaluations as a director, especially if an actor makes a choice that's different than what you agreed upon. If it's still okay, like with wardrobe or makeup, let's say, you have to think, it's different than what I wanted, but is it worth getting into an argument that could stop the production and ruin the mood on set for hours? Maybe this is a fight not worth having. And other times, some actors, I would give a direction, and they've done so much planning of all their different beats that a completely different direction throws them off, and they'll get frustrated, and you need to let them work through that frustration and not worry that they're frustrated or that they don't like you. As long as you're respectful to them, let them work through it, and then once you move on from that scene, you can check back in with them. Once you get what you need, check back in with them, make sure that they're feeling good about things and that you're back on the same page again. So, always get what you need, but don't micromanage the actors, but make sure that they feel that you're supporting them every step of the way.
Awesome.
Would be my
awesome
advice.
One final, do you tend to give your notes privately to them as opposed to yelling it from?
Yeah, I mean, it depends. Like, I don't think every note is worth getting up and whispering to an actor. I think, especially once you've been working a few days and everyone is comfortable, the actor won't mind. I mean, if you're over in a tent looking at the monitors, you don't want to yell a direction at an actor. That's really rude. But if it's just a little note like, Zoe, can you set the mug down before you say your line? We missed the line. you don't need to go up to her and have a private conversation. She can hear that in front of the crew. But if you're going up to an actor to tell them something isn't working and let's think about this for a second, that should be a private conversation with you and the actor, or with you and several of the actors. If it's something that is, it's just like blocking or technical, or just like, do it again, but with, whatever the direction is, yeah, I mean, anyway, so yeah, sometimes things are private, other times you can say them, but yeah, never yell or shout across a room at an actor, unless you're in like a big theater and there's 50 extras and the direction is very simple.
Right. Very cool. Very cool. Questions?
Yeah.
Speak loud.
My name's Jake. I guess my first question is, how'd you go about getting John Hawkes for your short film?
Sure. The answer is really simple. It's just that I had made. You live in LA long enough and you make a few short films and you make enough friends, then you end up, especially if you're a filmmaker, you end up knowing a lot of actors and other filmmakers and writers. An actor friend of mine knew I was making this new short, and he suggested John Hawkes, and yeah, I mean, it wasn't as simple as me just saying, yeah, that'd be amazing, even though I knew John Oakley was on my casting list for the Driftless Area. The role in the short film was quite a bit different. He had to play a character who did pulpy detective novels on audio tape. He was like the voice for these detective serials. And it's about like this guy who has a lot of time on his hands because if he's not in the booth recording these audio books, he has a lot of free time. He's walking his dogs in the Pasadena Arroyo. It's like a little trailway. And this beer bottle gets thrown out of a car from a bridge and almost hits him in the head. And he decides he's going to find, because it's an obscure brand of beer, he's going to find out who threw this bottle at him, just so that they know. And so he ends up going into this like very pedestrian mystery while creating this story. And of course, he's a noir detective novel voice on audio tape. So for me, I wanted to know. I said, I think John Hawkes is brilliant. I said, but does he have a voice that works for this? And my friend was like, come to this club. He's playing some music on Thursday, and so. Immediately I heard he did this song where he was like playing guitar and it was like he wasn't fully singing, he was kind of speaking, and I heard his voice and I was like, yeah, you could totally do this. And then so yeah, I met with John, and our first meeting, I was so excited to meet with him that I told him I felt I had to let him know, okay, I know it's just a short film, but I really would love to do this feature with you. And he said, well, let's slow down and let's see if we like working together first on this short, and if we do, we could do it. He goes, and also, a lot of people, say they have a role for me, and then when it comes down to it, they end up hiring Steve Buscemi, he said. And I was like, no, we don't want Steve Buscemi for this, we want you. And anyway, so we did this short film. It was just, it was dumb luck. A friend knew him. We had mutual friends, and then it was dumb luck, and then he liked the script, and we had a good movie. So it's like kind of a bit of both. You can't get a break just from luck. I mean, you have to have a good script. You have to know how to talk to an actor. Yeah, but at the same time. Yeah, I mean, it was luck that I met him.
That's awesome. We're on just so you know the time frame. We're on this side of 20 minutes. So remaining.
Okay, I'll try and be more concise.
No. I don't say that to have you compress.
No, it's no.
Other questions?
So,
Yeah, Megan.
okay, so my name is Megan, and I'm wondering, how you, like early on in your career, how you approached finding funding for your short films?
I think, I'm sorry, it was a little, how did I find funding for my shorts? Is that the question?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, a few different ways. I think on the Pathlights, we had, well, we didn't use Kickstarter, but it was like the equivalent of that. We made that
Just so you know, you're kind of breaking up. The picture's frozen, and your
1,000, I think.
Can you hear me?
Which is far less than it should have cost. Am I breaking up?
Yeah, you were breaking up. So
can you guys hear me?
Now we can.
No, we can't.
Now
We need to hang up and recall.
Nope. I think you just take back the beginning of your answer there.
Okay, sure.
Not all the way back, but how?
Okay, sure. So we did a Kickstarter, but we didn't. This was like back when that was the crowdfunding thing was new. So we only raised. I think we only asked for $5,000, which we got, and then it was a combination of my own money, credit card debt, my producer's money and credit card debt, and a couple of family members that gave me a couple $1,000s here and there. So it was like a mix, and then it was a lot of favors. One of our producers owned a Red camera and a lens set, and we, you know, and it had worked with the sound designer on some other like professional projects, and then that sound designer ended up being the guy that I brought on to do Driftless Area. So that's also another thing beyond actors. Short films are great ways to find out what crew members you'd love to work with again. But yeah, how we put the money together, it was just a combination of our own money, a Kickstarter, and some credit cards. But there are programs that support short films that you can apply for. And a lot of favors, like, you know, a lot of favors. Yeah.
Cool.
Oh, I'll tell you another thing that you can do is in LA, you know, permitting is a lot of money, but we brought on a film student as a producer, so we got student rates on the permitting, and that was a shrewd maneuver because, you know, instead of several $1,000s, we spent like $100 on the permits. And then we told everyone we were a student film. And so therefore all the locations were more willing to, you know, rent us out a whole restaurant for $500 or things like that. So you have to be pretty crafty.
Well, student producer.
Yeah, just.
I'll be a student producer to get you deals on things.
Say that again.
I'll be a student producer to get you deals on location.
Oh yeah, Justin said he'd be a student producer for you. Cool. Thunder, you had a question?
Yeah. So my name is Thunder. I have I'm working on a short film for one of my classes, and I'm working with actors that, you know, don't really have much acting experience. So, you know, how would you? Do you have any like advice for working with them?
Well, I would just, I guess I would still have the same conversations with them in that, you know, we would talk about like I would talk with them about the script and the character and get to what the film is about for each of you and make sure that's in line. What is the character's, you know, where is the character coming from, both like a backstory and emotionally, and yeah, and you ask the questions. What do they want? How? And then in each scene, you break down the beats. What do they want here? What do they feel here? What are the relationships? You know, where you could help them in like where are they? You know, before they came in this room. You know, where are they going after? And then. I definitely, with non-actors, would just make sure they know how to listen and that they don't just plan how they're going to deliver lines and show up and do their plan. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if you have, I mean, I assume if you cast them and they're non-actors, there's a reason you cast them already, is I assume you like what they're going to do. But so I don't know. Like, do they have no experience of working in film or stage?
I mean, they're just friends that I asked.
Right.
And the only reason why I asked them was because, like, you know, they kind of fit the image in my head that I was.
Sure. Yeah, and that's good. Maybe there's a way to, before you do the shoot with the crew there, you could just go with I mean, it doesn't need to be a nice camera. You could just go with a camcorder or your cell phone and run through the scenes with the actors and just to get them comfortable doing the scenes. The only thing I would warn, especially with non-actors, is you don't lose the freshness, like you don't over-rehearse them, and that they don't, if you notice that they're getting into a pattern of saying the line exactly the same way they said it before because they noticed that you said that was good, that you're able to give them a direction that just, even if it's not the way you want it done on the day, that just to make them do it differently.
Sure.
So you could just throw them off guard a little bit to keep them fresh. But I think if you're able to video them doing it in a low pressure environment, you'll see what their habits are and what they're doing that you don't like. You know, you may find that with a non-actor, the more you do it, the worse it gets, and that their instincts are correct, and then you'll know, okay, we should stop. And then on the day, because I assume you're going to shoot digitally or on film?
Digital.
Yeah, so then, you know, if you find that the actors, their first takes are best, you could even just shoot the rehearsal. You know, just when you block the scene, don't have them fully do the lines, just have them just like read the lines on the script and not really give a performance, and then just shoot. You may as well shoot the rehearsal, you know? Yeah.
Thank you. Great. Other questions? Yes, sir.
Hey, my name's Zach. Kind of a two-parter. I heard you briefly mention you're from Iowa. I was wondering if you could go into like your background of like where you went to college at, and then conversely, any directors you worked with, maybe as like an intern or understudy that inspired you.
Yeah. I went to the Art Institute of Chicago for film school, and then the answer to your second question, and I grew up in southeastern Iowa. I was actually born in Montreal, and then I grew up in this town called Fairfield, Iowa. I went to LA in between my junior and senior year of college and interned on Bat Santa. It was the first real movie that I worked on, and which I was really excited about because I had just seen Ghost World, and Terry Zwigoff is, you know, especially at the time, was like a personal hero. And I was like, you know, these are the kind of movies I like and want to make. And so, so that was, you know, a great experience in that both watching when Zwigoff would, just watching when his hand was more present and when he let the actors, especially Billy Bob, kind of run the show. It was a very interesting learning process for me because it just helped me understand, especially when you have an actor like Billy Bob Thornton, the leeway that you give someone like that and the respect you give someone like that, and also, you know, watching how he picked and chose his battles with him was really interesting. And I learned a lot from watching how Billy Bob would work. But yeah, what I did was I was supposed to be an intern and working for the AD, and so they'd have me like on a professional set. They have the PAs do what's called lockup, which is like you go to the perimeters of the set and make sure no one, either your crew members or just strangers, end up wandering onto the set and ruining a take. But it really sucks if you're there on your first film shoot and you want to like be close to the action and learn by watching them. I'm like, you know, all the way, we were shooting in a mall a lot of the time, and I'd be, you know, I'd get sent to back depths of this department store. And all I could think of is, how do I get back to the set? And so I befriended the video assist. When people used to shoot on film, there'd be a video tap into the camera that would record video, so you'd get like a video monitor, so you could see what the shot is on the monitor as well. For the producers, and sometimes the director would be there. And so I worked with the video assist guy, and so when we would do dolly shots or whatever, I would just wrangle his cable for him, so that way I could be near the DP, be near Terry and Billy and all these guys. And the assistant directors, I think, were a little upset with me, but because I was working for school credit, which I don't think they let you do anymore, they've really kind of shut that down because people took advantage of labor that way. But I took advantage of it to learn. So I think it's important, especially when you're just getting out of school, to take whatever opportunities you can on short films, on independent features, especially if you can get a chance as a PA to do a good job as a PA. But in my case, I wasn't getting paid and I was still being abused. But to really like ask people questions, to make friends, to just watch and learn how people work. And I learned a great deal on that film. So yeah.
All right. Other questions?
Yes. What are like the biggest differences for you when you worked on your first feature film? I guess like mainly creatively as a director.
The biggest thing was time. I thought, well, first of all, a shoot is really grueling, but when you're doing a short film, it's 3 or 4 days and then you're done. So it's like a sprint, and a feature is a marathon. And especially, we only had 3.5 weeks of pre-production, and our shooting schedule shrunk during that time as budget realities became clearer. And so, I think like the biggest thing was I'm used to being very prepared. I don't do storyboards, but I do shot lists for every single shot. And then I change them on the location scout, and I update again on the tech scout. And so the DP and I are very much clear what the game plan is. But because we moved the shoot to Vancouver, and I had to spend so much time with the location manager and the production designer, finding the right locations, and we're just doing a lot of work in a short amount of time, that I had to go by my gut a lot more and learn to live on the fly a lot more than I was on my shorts, when I feel I was more just running the game plan. And so I definitely leaned on my cinematographer more than I ever had in my shorts. And one thing we did was, especially because we were shooting about an hour out of the city every day, the assistant director would pick us up from the hotel, and me and the DP and the assistant director would drive to set every day, and we would go over the shot list and the setups every morning on the way to set, so that we knew, the AD every morning would say, okay guys, you got to cut X amount of shots, there's way too many. So that's how the morning would begin every day. And then Daniel and I would go through, why we disagreed with him. Daniel Voltheim is my DP. Or we would ultimately say, he's right, and we could probably cut this or this. And so we just take advantage of every hour of the day that we had, in order to, when we're on set, we're not wasting time. We're always thinking a step ahead. And, I had never shot with 2 cameras before. We had a second camera. So sometimes we'd send a camera operator off to just get some atmospheric shots. Other times we would set a second camera. We would shoot, so we have 2 cameras rolling. Sometimes you don't want that, because you can't get the coverage you want without the camera being in the shot. But other times you could really take advantage of a second camera and you can move quickly that way. Or you can have your first camera doing the shot you're on, and then you could have your one of your camera assistants set up the camera at the on the dolly track for the shot you're going to go to next, so that once you wrap the shot that you're on, you're ready to just move the actors right into the next shot. It's already pre-lit, the camera's set up, and you're just ready to rehearse the blocking. So there's strategies to really take advantage of time, and that for me was how to take advantage of the limited time, how to adjust to being comfortable on the fly more, and trust in my collaborators more. And then also I just every day reminded myself, you worked so many years for this. And even though I was under so much pressure and there were so many things that were happening differently than I imagined, to just enjoy it, because it's over very quickly. And now I'm working to get back to doing it again. So I feel like I did a pretty good job of enjoying it at the same time. Because otherwise, what's the point of it? But I think the difference with the short is just you have many more tools at your disposal. Take advantage of them. Trust the collaborators, and yeah, just time management is so important. Like, someone was just telling me about Project Greenlight, which I don't watch, but they were saying like how the director spent this whole debate about how he had to shoot on film because we all like the look of film more, or at least a lot of people do, but it costs a lot of money. And the line producer, I guess, on that TV show was trying to tell him, no, let's save the money on the film and let's get some extra days in the shooting schedule. And I think I'm 100% in the line producer's corner in that debate, because if you could have I didn't shoot on film. We shot on the Alexa, and we got these really wonderful Panavision anamorphic lenses that are about like 50 years old. So they had a really cinematic, softer look to the film. But if I had the choice of shooting my movie on film or having 2 or 3 extra days to shoot the film, I would choose days over the film stock 10 out of 10 times, just because time is everything. Because you just want to make sure you get what you need and you don't have to move on. There's nothing worse than having to move on because you feel you and the actors aren't sure if you got it. That's the worst. And especially if you don't have enough time to block and get the coverage you need, so you have options in the editing room, or to orchestrate a long shot with cast and with the camera crew and everything. You don't have the time to do that. You got to shoot more conventionally. So time is gold in your shoot, and so it's a lot about weighing, idealism and reality. And I think it's really important to listen to your line producer and not just fight with them and think they're the enemy. Everyone is trying to make the same film. So that would be my advice. Don't be an idealist as much as there's certain things to stick up for and defend, and there's other times to make sure that you have enough time to make the film right. Yeah.
You make and we're going to have to close out here pretty quickly, but you make a great argument for not being the smartest person in the room. To have a good producer, a good line producer, a great first AD, because after all, they're going to manage money, they're going to manage schedule. The AD's going to, among the other duties, going to manage set and time and day and stuff like that. And they're really there to assist you so that you can be free to get your vision on the screen, and that you can get the movie made.
Yeah,
so, I wouldn't skimp on.
You're the authority on this story, and you're the authority on the film, but they are the authority on how to execute a film. If you're a first-time director, you're going to end up with a line producer and producers that have made many movies. If you don't listen to them and you're always fighting them. And I gotta say, there were a few times where I did fight them, and looking back on it, I feel like a fool, and you can only learn that when you go through it. But I'm going to take that with me to the next film I make, because yeah, it's just the same with the creative collaborators. You have to listen to the line producer and the producer, because they're there to support you. That's their job. So there's certain things you say, no, we cannot change. Like, there's a house on fire in my film, just really briefly. We burned this house down, and I was very adamant, we're not going to do this with visual effects. We're going to really burn this house down. It's very important to the plot of the movie. And there were times where I think the producers were getting really nervous. We were already shooting the film. We hadn't found a house where we could do this, but I just stuck to my guns on that. And one of our producers like found this guy through calling the fire departments, and you know, drove all the way out to like get this guy to sign on the dotted line, gave him a little extra money and like a handshake, and we got the fire department to do this with us, and it's a beautiful. We got beautiful images from it, and I'm so glad I stuck to my guns on that and didn't just give in right away. But there are many other things that my producers and the line producers were right from the beginning, and I think I just, you know, I put them through the ringer for too long before realizing that they were right, and that we have to do what's best to get the movie in the can, and not make this movie that will never be made in reality. So it's always good to listen to whomever you're working with. Yeah.
Zach, I want to thank you for making yourself available and for the insights, very valuable insights and information that you shared about your experience making this and your career path. I hope we get to do it again. And
Sure.
I'm going to call you within a half an hour if you're going to be around just to debrief. But we're going to say goodbye, students.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, guys. Good luck with your films, and yeah. Very cool. Thanks for letting me talk to you. It's always I get very excited to talk to people who are just starting making their movies. It's inspiring for me, and it makes me feel like when I was in film school was a very charged time. So thank you for letting me talk to you guys. And if you get a chance to watch the Driftless Area when it comes out, please do. And you can watch my movie Pathlights, the last short film. I put it up on Vimeo a few months ago. It had a distributor, but if you search for Pathlights John Hawkes, you can find it on Vimeo.
And if you're going to give a password, if you want it private or I don't know.
It's not private.
Okay.
It's publicly on there now.
Okay.
I don't think. I mean, I haven't promoted it. There's only a few hundred views of it, but it's on there now, so you could take a look at it.
Pathlights, P-A-T-H.
Pathlights. Pathlights. And if you search with John Hawkes' name, it'll probably be easier to find it. I could email Rick. I can email you a link also.
Let's go.
Rex.
Yep. Awesome. Well, thanks so much. Like I said, I'll talk to you in a little bit, just to debrief, and thank you for being here. It really, really was, for me, it's been a marvelous time. And I love the movie, and when it comes out in the spring, we're all going to go see it. Well, we maybe not together, but I'm sure we'll all go see it. All right, awesome. Thank you very much, Zachary.
Cool. Bye, guys.
Bye for now.
Bye. Thanks, Rex.